911 Next Gen, $2 million for PILT payments, and $3 million for the Michigan Infrastructure Council. The Michigan Infrastructure Council, kind of a newer council, and needed some funding to kind of do some things they were looking at there. So further with the state budget, $14 million for PFAS remediation grants, $5.2 million for transportation budget, which was an increase to local rate agencies of about $1.8 billion. 26 million for certified community behavioral clinics for certification there. 5 million for the second year of a 5-year phase out of use of the CMH local match funding to support Medicaid restricted mental health services. 4.25 million for the County Veteran Service Fund, 2 million for secondary road patrol. For secondary road patrol, it's hit very hard during COVID due to people not being on the road, lack of tickets being written. We actually had a meeting with the Sheriff's Association earlier this week. It's something we do. We meet with other countywide associations, and they're actually looking at different ways to fund secondary road patrol, which was good to hear. 14.8 million in county jail reimbursement, 2 million for conservation district support. So that was kind of in a nutshell, real quick, what was kind of in the budget. Of course, there'll be numerous supplementals that are actually starting to move through right now. The legislature just came back this week from a hunting break. They'll be in the next 2 to 3 weeks. They're working on getting some supplementals done that both deal with general fund dollars and some of the ARP funds. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've been doing with a coalition on the ARP funds. So we are part of a coalition and help form the coalition that is basically a roadmap to Michigan's future. And what this is a coalition. Now I think it's more than 50 partners in there, and it comprises of local units of government, businesses, philanthropy groups, environmental organizations. And the intent is to have the state put up a dollar figure, and we're not tied to the dollar figure, but a significant dollar figure to allow for matching funds for counties, locals, community groups, all these groups, so we can actually make sure these ARPA dollars go as far as possible. Because when you're looking at what some of these smaller locals are getting, it's not a lot of money, and it's not going to go any far. But if we can pool resources, we can make sure these dollars are transformational and go a long way. So there's 6 key areas. They're kind of listed there: resilient, sustainable water systems, high-speed broadband access, fiscal health for state and local governments, thriving communities for housing, community development, economic development, public health, and public safety. The website's listed there. You can actually go there, and there's an executive summary there. There's a lot more detail in each of these 6 areas. And we've been working really hard on this. We had some commissioners come into town earlier this week and really start pushing the legislature on spending their ARPA funds because, as we know, these funds need to be allocated by 2024. They need to be spent by 2026. So if there's going to be any capital projects, we got to start moving, because it's going to be tough to get people. There's going to have to be, if you're doing any sort of capital expenditure, you're going to have to do engineering studies. There's a long process that's going to take to get these funds, and we want to make sure that we start using them now. So that's kind of been our message to the legislature is, all right, let's start moving. Let's start allocating these funds. Let's start appropriating these funds. And we've given you a plan to do that so that our counties, our locals, our businesses can kind of pool resources and make sure these funds go as far as possible. So that's kind of what we've been doing with the state funding. And you, like I said, you can go to that website and check it out and get more detail if you'd like. Some other legislative issues we've been working on, of course, 4-year county commissioner terms is something we've been working on for many sessions. Right now, it is on the House floor. It is on expected to be on second reading today. We're pushing hard to get this out of the House by the end of this year. So that would be hopefully a vote next week. So if you do see your legislators around, please put a bug in their ear to, especially your House members, to vote on this. We did get it out of committee. 10-2. We are expecting a little opposition, not a ton, but hopefully we can get this off the House floor in the next couple of weeks. Local government finance reforms. This is kind of a broad topic, and you can kind of see some of the areas we're really focusing on there. One of the part of the coalition asks is setting up a county revenue sharing trust fund. As you know, county revenue sharing dollars are appropriated each year. They're statutory revenue sharing. We don't get constitutional revenue sharing like a lot of the cities and townships do. So what we're proposing is setting up a trust fund that would essentially be a virtual lockbox, so the legislature couldn't raid that fund every year and use it for other things. Of course, mandated services, making sure those are sufficiently funded is always something we're asking for. There's a legislation that would allow for a tourism reinvestment excise tax. This would allow for an excise tax to be put on for hotel rooms, things like that. But that tax dollars would be earmarked for EMS, public safety, those sort of things. Because what we found, especially during COVID, is a lot of our tourism communities, which I'm sure Berrien County is, really got their public health, or not public health, but public safety departments got really stressed with all the tourism. They couldn't keep up, so they needed more funding, and this was an opportunity to allow for that. Also looking, when you look at the Raffaele decision a few years ago and how foreclosures are handled, back in the late 90s, there was an opportunity for counties to allow the state to be that foreclosing unit. We are looking to reopen that so that counties could opt out of that process again if they wanted to. So we're working on that. And of course, special millages is always something we're talking about. We don't believe any special millages should be subject to DDA or TIFA capture. Moving on to some other legislation, binding arbitration. There's legislation out there that would expand binding arbitration to other bargaining units, in this case, corrections officers. This is something we've long opposed over the years. This legislation has passed out of the House and is in Senate committee, but it's something we have opposed for a long time. We just think it's a fairness issue with all county employees. Opioid settlement. We had a phone call a few weeks ago, or was it might have been last week, I can't remember now, talking about this topic specifically and some of the way this process will work. This slide talks about a little more. That recording is available and it goes into much more detail, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but there is a couple steps that counties will have to take if they do want to be eligible for these funds. And I encourage you to go to that website and check out the recording that's on our website. Mental health. There's a couple competing plans, one Senate plan and a House plan that would kind of change the way mental health services are delivered at the state. We are opposed to both plans. Basically because we don't like when local control is taken away, and that's what these plans do, especially the Senate plan. The Senate plan, I think, has been moved out of committee at this point and is sitting on the Senate floor. Representative Whiteford's bills are still sitting in committee. I don't expect much movement before the end of this year, but just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of this, and I'm sure your community mental health agencies have been talking to you about this as well. 911, this is kind of an urgent issue. The 911 Service Enabling Act expires at the end of the year. Rep. Cali has legislation that would authorize 911 operations through 2027. Basically, these surcharges that we're talking about would fund Next Gen 911. There would be some increases in some charges. However, if it is determined that there's more revenue than is needed, there is a rollback process to roll back some of those percentages. Right now, it's out of the House, obviously passed the House overwhelmingly, and now sitting on the Senate floor. We do expect to get this out by the end of the year. Property tax exemptions, just wanted to highlight that this is something we're consistently fighting against, whether it's, heavy equipment, micro fulfillment centers, broadband. It was one that recently got vetoed by the governor this year. We just feel like we're not opposed to property tax exemptions, but if the state is going to vote on a property tax exemption, locals should be reimbursed for it. And I'm sure many of you remember the disabled veteran property tax exemption from a few years ago. It was a great concept. However, the state voted on it and never reimbursed the locals for it. Well, they've recognized that, and there's actually, I think there's about 3 or 4 pieces of legislation that are being either introduced or going to be introduced that actually reimburse counties for that. A couple of them we like, couple of them we don't like. There is Senator Bumstead is working on one that we've had a lot of input on and think is the best option. Once that bill's introduced, we'll make sure to pass that along to you. But it still provides for a property tax exemption for those disabled veterans, but also reimburses the counties for that property lost by the state. These are our policy committees, and many of you participate on our policy committees or multiple committees, which we really appreciate or have in the past. Of course, you don't have to come to Lansing if you don't want to. You can participate remotely, and that was an option prior to the pandemic. So if you would like to be on any of our committees, please feel free to fill out an application and we will get you on there. We do have a MAC pack. It's a smaller pack. We appreciate any support you can provide. We do use this primarily to fund those fundraisers those former county commissioners have in Lansing. We have 31 former county commissioners in the legislature right now, so quite a good group. So if you are able to support that, we would appreciate it. Here's your MAC Government Affairs team. Dina Bosworth's our Director of Government Affairs. She handles mainly our general government, tax policy, transportation, environmental issues. Megan Kite handles our Judiciary and Health and Human Services issues. And Hannah Sweeney's our Government Affairs Assistant. And she's a great resource. If you don't know where to go or you have a question, you can reach out to Hannah and she will point you in the right direction. I mentioned our conferences. Next conference is our legislative conference. That'll be this March 21st through 23rd. That's always here in Lansing. And then our annual conference will be September 18th through 21st, and that will be in Port Huron this year. And then finally, communication tools. We provide a variety of communication tools. We want to make sure you guys are as informed as possible without being too overwhelming on our part. So we have a weekly legislative update in addition to our Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, podcast. We also have a newsletter. We went back to a printed newsletter that comes out every other month. So hopefully you're getting everything you need to be the best county commissioners you can. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So Steve can hear you. Well, I'll get started. Steve, the commissioners were given a draft of a resolution supporting MAC and MML's efforts on the roadmap to prosperity. Is that something that you could spend a few minutes just talking about the efforts and talking about why it would make some sense to support those efforts?
Yeah. I had a couple slides in there on it, and it is important because we want to make sure that these dollars are transformational. You know, this is unprecedented direct funding from the federal government to local units of government. And we want to be transformational from these funds. We want to be careful of ongoing programs. And so our intent was to basically give the state a roadmap on how they could help locals make these funds transformational. And that's what that my roadmap does. It gives the state a plan so they don't have to develop it on their own, on a way that, hey, counties could match with it, local, make it optional, make these dollars go as far as possible. So right now, the way the process will end up working is it's not like the governor can do it by herself or the legislature can do it by themselves. It's going to have to be appropriated. So right now, we haven't seen much movement on that. So that's been our message, and that needs to be the message right now is we got to move on this now. We can't afford to sit on these funds. We're running up against deadlines. If you look at the end of 2024 as being funds being allocated, end of 2026 to be, you actually have to spend the funds. That's not a lot of time if you start looking at some of these projects. And to highlight a couple other things, there's been two bills passed at the federal level, one out of the Senate that's now in the House and one out of the House that's now in the Senate, both bipartisan support. The Senate bill actually passed out unanimously, but it actually would open up for $10 million of those ARPA funds to be allowed for revenue loss. So if you remember, there's specific expenses that these ARPA funds can be used for, but there's also revenue loss. And if you calculated a revenue loss, those funds can be basically used as general fund dollars at the local level. This legislation would open up to $10 million to be available for revenue loss. And if you about 30% of your funds could be used for infrastructure purposes. So that's specifically road building projects, those sort of things. You know, the ARPA funds don't allow for that sort of investment right now. So two important pieces of federal legislation I want to highlight as well, that if that gets passed, you know, that could really allow some flexibility at the local level for these funds to be used.
So members of the board, your staff has presented a draft resolution that would provide support for Steve's efforts. If the board is comfortable, I think it would make sense to bring that forward into today's agenda and take action on. I've reviewed it. I think it makes a lot of sense. What's kind of neat about this is seeing the team up between Michigan Association of Counties and the Michigan Municipal League working in tandem to try and advocate for what I believe would be a strategic investment by the state of Michigan into local units of government. To the board, any?
Is it what he just said, what Steve just said about the spending the money and?
So if you want to speak with Steve, make sure you turn your microphone on so he can hear you.
Yeah, but that's what I said. Is that what this resolution?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to know if that was what this resolution you're talking about is what he just talked about.
Yeah, so you've seen a variety of local governments, local counties bringing forward resolutions of support for the efforts between MAC and the MML. We have mocked up, or Annette has done all the legwork on mocking up a resolution that would allow Berrien County to be one of those voices of support. I would absolutely encourage that the board take action on that.
Brian, can you do that by consensus or do you need a motion?
So we have a draft resolution ready. We'd like to bring that forward to today's meeting.
So we can do that just by consensus,
Yeah.
just everybody agreeing to it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've reviewed the plan. I think it makes sense, particularly from the perspective of what we've been discussing as a board for our strategic initiatives. Looking at those guide rails of what we're going to be doing, our ARPA spending with, any leveraging that we can do, and encouraging the states to use those dollars that have not yet been appropriated for matching makes a lot of sense, because one of the things that we need to be mindful of is just resiliency within our community and how we can partner with all of those different stakeholders that we have, including MAC from a county perspective, but also from the state perspective, to be able to make us stronger. So I'm supportive of it.
Steve, Commissioner Ezra Scott, I've got a question on the infrastructure money for broadband that the state is coming out with. Is there going to be any special dispensation, if that's the correct word, or any special consideration for the municipalities who got a very low amount of ARPA funds, such as a lot of rural villages or townships? And those are the ones that are struggling the most with broadband connectivity. Are they going to be able to kind of be at the first of the line to get some additional funding for their buy-in to help augment their money and county money for broadband in their area?
Yeah, so we're not quite that detailed yet on the process. We're more at the state level saying, hey, state, put up 500 million right now for broadband, allow these locals to match. And to your point, Ezra, we're not talking like a 50-50 match. We're talking state, you need to put up 75-25, just because of what you said. When you look at some of these locals and what they're getting, it's not even close enough to funding of what they need. But you do bring up a good point, and why I haven't been in those discussions specifically on the broadband side. I'm sure it's being talked about because we have MML, MTA, us. We have a lot of other business groups, local chambers that are involved that are bringing up a lot of topics too. But yeah, the intent is to not allow those that are already set to kind of get these grants to make their already 100, megabyte downloads to a billion or whatever it is. It's to get everyone kind of up to a minimum level. And I think they'll put some baseline numbers in there as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Werfel?
Hi, Steve, this is Commissioner Werfel. My question is, how receptive are you seeing the legislature and the governor's office to the roadmap?
Initially, we had a lot of positive conversations, and we're continuing the conversations. The problem right now is it's the speed. They're not moving fast enough. You're starting to see a lot of kind of piecemeal bills being introduced. The Senate yesterday did a bunch of water bill or water infrastructure bills that had dealt with dams and high water and PFAS and things like that. So they're kind of picking and choosing a little bit of our plan, and those are all part of our plan now, which we're fine with as long as they keep moving along and not, get hung up in the political process. So I think our plan is good. I think people like some parts of our plan more than others, but so far the discussions we've had with both the House, the Senate, and the governor's office have been very positive, and they were made aware of this months ago. Now it's like, we just got to get them to move. We can't let them to continue to kind of go back and forth, because I think it's getting a little political now, and that's what we don't want to have happen. We want to get these funds out.
Okay, Steve, in the House or the Senate, what do you feel the Shirkley and the Whitehead, how do you feel it's looking to get passed, or what would you suggest the commissioners do moving forward on that?
Yeah, so the Senate package was referred to Senate Committee on GovOps, which typically when bills get referred to that committee, they're either going to be pushed through or they're going to go there and die. And Senator Shirkey, Majority Leader Shirkey, chairs that committee. So obviously those bills made it out of that committee. Now they're on the House floor. I think it's going to be a tall order to get anything done this year. Almost impossible at this point. What you guys can do is when, over the holiday break, when you see your legislators around, talk to them about it. Talk to them about the concerns about the loss of local control, because that's really the concern, is that, when you take away that local control, what happens to it? If it becomes a private provider, how is that really going to work? From what we're hearing from our friends at CMH, who are on the front lines of this, and we fought this, I want to say 6-7 years ago when it came out again, or when it was first introduced back then. They're the ones that, really know this in and out. We've just been supporting them through the process. But that's really what you can do, is when you see legislators around during the holiday break, talk to them about it. And I know our Health and Human Services Committee had put out some talking points on it as well. And I'm sure those are on our website.
Ezra?
Yes.
Steve, Jim Curran. I heard you say earlier, ARPA funds can't be used for roads. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the initial ARPA, if you look at the way the funds can be used, the original ARPA plan would not allow you to just go redo your roads. Okay, that was not an actual eligible expense. Now, if you determine that you had revenue loss, and you could use those funds for whatever you wanted. So then you could use them for roads, but you could not say, I'm going to go fix this road and I'm going to directly, that's an eligible expense. It's not an eligible expense at this point. Now, should that federal legislation get passed, it allows some more flexibility there.
Thank you for that explanation.
Any other questions for Steve? Yes, Commissioner Freeling.
Good morning, Steve. It's a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being here to report. I had a question with regards to the 2022 budget. I know with the revenue sharing of the 2% increase, that it's tie-barred with pensions and underfunded. What is the threshold of that? I can't remember what the percentage is.
I can't remember either. I don't know if it's not 100%, because, that fluctuates so much month to month, depending on your investments. But we can find out for you, and I can shoot you an email on that.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Yarborough. I think I saw something we had. I thought it said it was 69% in the COLA.
In the COLA.
And we were at 67.6 or something.
Right.
So did you hear me?
Yep. That may be correct. I can double check with Dina. She'll know, and I can just shoot you guys an email for sure.
Any other questions for Director Curry? All right. Well, Steve, thank you very much for taking time and filling this board in on exactly what's going on. We appreciate it. Anytime.
No problem. Thanks again for having me. Have a great holiday if I don't see you guys before then.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Yep. Yes, Annette, you can have as much time as you want.
This is the honorary resolution that I had emailed, and I did not get you guys to sign this. So remember that there's 2 copies of this. I'm going to pass this around. And while Mr. Curry talked about you guys possibly being on a MAC committee, make sure that you're communicating that with our office though, because we have to keep the official list for where you sit. Then we go and check attendance and things like that. So just make sure that if you do contact them and you do put yourself out there for a committee, that you let us know. That was it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're down to public comments. Those speaking, please identify yourself by name and location.
Michael Floyd, City of Benton Harbor. I attended a summit a few years ago for the Obama Foundation. My brother's keeper about raise the age is brought to our attention. I'm glad to see that there's another conversation about that. I'm glad there's support for that. And that came from the youth of Detroit about raise the age. And it's glad to see that something's come home for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comments?
Hello, my name is Sean Hill. I live in the city of St. Joe here. Some of you probably might remember me last meeting. I was talking about the face masks at the schools and everything like that. Yesterday, I did attend the Berrien County Health Department meeting again to talk about the quarantines. The quarantines seem to be the issues at the local schools, and I just showed up there to bring it up to the new director. I want to give kudos. I think Guy is a good guy, pardon the pun, but he did take the time to meet with a few of us after the meeting, him and Candy both. So I give him credit for that, for meeting with us and taking the time to listen to what we had to say. But I do want to go on and he seemed responsive to what we were actually talking to him about. So I really give him kudos for that, and you as a board for making him their interim health department director. But I do want to express that I do feel the quarantines, that seems to be the thing that's keeping the mask on our kids. I've been told that by a pretty reliable source. That's a big driver of why these kids, like at St. Joe schools, are keeping the mask on them. Is because of the quarantine rules. I just wanted to bring that up and see if you guys can work with them and see if we can get this resolved. I mean, I go back to the fact that kids survive this 99.9%. That's the science. Commissioner Harrison, you said you believe in the science. That's the science of it. 99.9% of the kids that get this survive. And even in adults, older adults, it's 94.9% they survive. But I do want to point out one more thing. During the meeting yesterday, I don't know her name, but you guys were having discussion with the Berrien County the Health Board. And there was a lady that was speaking, and
2 minutes, sir.
And she expressed that we can only talk during the public comment. And as soon as the public comment started, she gets up and walks out of the room. Doesn't even care really what we have to say. And I did want to point out one more thing. Sorry about this, but I was kind of disappointed in Dr. Edwards too. This is the second time I've been to a meeting, and Dr. Edwards walks out when public comment starts. Yesterday, he did stay for a little bit, the first part of it, but then all of a sudden he got upset and he left. So, I mean, I get it. Sometimes you don't like hearing what people have to say, but you got to take the good and the bad. You got to hear people out, what they have to say. It was a legitimate concern that our residents do have. And I just want to say he needs to sit there and listen to what we have to say too, okay? So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sean.
Sorry for going over.
Melissa Clapper, St. Joe Township. I too was at the board meeting at the health department yesterday. And so I just want to point out that as was talked about yesterday, science evolves. So as you're talking about the science and pointing out some science facts today, when one of the doctors started to talk, yes, he was expressing something during a public comment time, but he was trying to correct a misinformation. So he was pretty much shut down. Yes, Dr. Edwards did leave, but if you were at the meeting, after Luke stood up and pretty much threatened everybody with this thing that he was passing out. And if we accepted it, or if the board accepted it, then we were all going to be complicit in this conspiracy theory that, you know, there's going to be another trial on the thing of Nuremberg, et cetera, about, because this is just a big hoax put on by the county. So, you know, I appreciate the fact that everybody has the right to speak. The lady that left was a person that was there, a citizen. She left because she felt unsafe after those threats were made by Luke, and Luke just kept talking. Dr. Edwards left because he felt that if by accepting that, that would have put the health board at risk maybe for accepting something and then being told that if you didn't act, you were also going to be on trial with all of this. So while I appreciate the fact that, you know, everybody has the right to speak, which they do. That is one of the things about this country that is very good. But you can't just take pieces of information. So if you're agreeing to the science on things that you agree with, but you don't agree with the science that somebody else say, you can't pick and choose. Either the science is there, it evolves. Yesterday, it was pointed out that a year and a half ago in October or in March, you know, Dr. Fauci said that masks were important. He corrected that as they found out more and more because science evolves with more information. So I think we need to be careful about how we accept things. And
2 minutes, ma'am.
And I do like the Mr. Miller is a good choice, as is Candy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sheriff Paul Bailey, I live in Berrien Township, but I just wanted to come up here and use my time to take a moment of silence for Oakland County and all the students and the deaths that happened at Oxford School. So if we could just take a moment of silence and pray for all those people that are going to be affected for the rest of their life. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff. Are there any other comments, public comments? All right, seeing that there's none, we'll move to other business. The only thing that I have for other business is there any resolutions that any commissioner wants pulled from the 10:30? And Annette, is the resolution that you passed around about the roadmap, is that going to be on the agenda?
It is an added.
It's an added
resolution.
It's an added resolution,
agenda.
so if anybody wants to pull any of that, let me or let Annette know, or when Mac gets here, I can let him know. I may or may not be around to all the committee meetings, so if there isn't any, then stand adjourned.